How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to yet another episode of the Liberation Hour. There will not be any intro for this one. We're pretty much going to get right into things here. I hope everybody is doing well. And once again, as always, thank you for your continued support for the channel and everything we've been doing over here. I know that, we're now on episode 8, which is crazy how fast time flies. We got a lot more stuff that'll be coming out soon. But this is one that I've been planning for a couple weeks now, and I wanted to get things rolling on this since the DNC is now over. The debates will be coming up in about a couple of weeks, and this is going to be my official slash way too early 2024 election prediction. So we're going to go through state by state, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on who's going to win. I kind of have things written down in a few different categories for this, so I'll be sharing my screen quite a bit during this podcast. Again, please, before we get things going, please hit that subscribe button. Please like the video. Check out other videos on this channel. Again, your support is huge. Please share this out with as many people as you can. But I'm going to go through a couple of different scenarios of things that are possible, and then I'm going to get into what I think is going to happen pretty much for this election. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here with you guys so you guys can see what I'm seeing. So, firstly, I want to bring up the states that are just going to easily be safe blue states. It's really no question whatsoever. A couple of states that are already factored in I have here are Maine. Again, Maine, the second district in Maine, going to go red. The other three the other electoral vote, I should say, going to go blue. And then in Nebraska, you're going to have districts 1 and district 3 go red, and then District 2 is going to go blue. So it'll be 4 electoral votes towards the Republicans, 1 towards the Democrats in Nebraska, 1 towards the Republicans in Maine, the other 3 towards the Democrats in Maine. So let's just go ahead and go through some safe blue states here. So they call it the left coast for a reason. It's going to remain Democratic. So California, Oregon, Washington, all going to go for the Democrats 100%, no questions asked. Hawaii also, no questions asked. That's going to go for the Democrats. Illinois, another safe state, that's going to go blue for the Democrats. New Mexico, also going to go for the Democrats here too. Colorado's a pretty safe state as well. That's going to go blue as well. So you can already see here the Democrats, racking up a ton of electoral votes already. I have some others written down here if I can adjust my screen. So Massachusetts, Rhode Island, yeah, a lot of the states on the East Coast going to go blue. So Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Washington D.C. is definitely going to go blue as well. Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland. So pretty much we can go through all of these right here. All of these are going to go blue. We'll come back to New Jersey here in a second. Vermont and New York, of course. New York's going to go blue, no doubt. Vermont also going to go blue. We'll come back to New Hampshire in a little bit. Again, there's a couple of outlier states there in the east that'll be a little bit closer, but those are pretty much all of the easy blue states for the Democrats. And right there, that's already 185 electoral votes. So a ton right there already going blue. And then now we go over to the safe red states. So let's go ahead and go through those. Safe red states here. Texas going to go red. It's not going to be as easy of a red as usual, but it is going to go red 100%. The Democrats are within 5 points actually in Texas right now. You've had a lot of people around the Austin area, of course, is a very blue area. I know that even some parts of San Antonio have gone a little bit more bluer recently, but Texas is still going to go red. It's not quite time yet, maybe in 2028, but I think Texas is still going to go to the Republicans. We can pretty much go through most of the South here. Louisiana, going to go red. Mississippi, going to go red. Alabama is going to go red. South Carolina is going to go red. We'll come back to Georgia later on. Tennessee is going to go red. Kentucky is going to go red. Despite having a Democratic governor, Kentucky's a very interesting situation. I actually saw an interesting video the other day on Kentucky describing how things have changed there really over time. West Virginia is going to go red. Ohio is going to go red. There have been times, of course, Ohio has gone blue, but it's been pretty solid red state roughly over the last decade or so. Arkansas going to go red. Oklahoma is going to go red. Kansas is going to go red. And sorry, I've got some volume on one of my it's right here. Sorry, I got an advertisement on my screen. Missouri is going to go red as well. And then Florida, that's actually a little bit closer too, but I think Florida is also going to go red. We can also go to both Dakotas up here, North and South Dakota going to go red. Indiana is going to go red as well towards the Republicans. Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. All those states are going to go red. So you can already see Republicans racking up a ton over here. 204, 185 to the Republicans already. And then I believe I had a couple other states written down here. Utah, don't believe I've marked them yet. Utah is going to go red. And I believe Iowa was the other one that I had that is also going to go red. It's going to be in the likely red. They're up like 6 or 7 points, but that's pretty much going to be all of the red states. I don't think I marked Iowa, but Iowa has been a pretty red state in recent years. So this is how things look right now before we get into the last few. Oh, I forgot about Alaska. Alaska is also going to go red. So you can see right here, 219 to 185 in favor of Trump. And now we kind of get into some interesting states. We've got roughly about, I'd say, 10 or so states to go. Some of which will be battleground states, others which won't. So I wrote down the likely blue states, and I just want to go through the percentages for everybody. The pure blue states are ones that are Harris plus 10, and some of the which haven't even had polling in months, just because it's obviously going to go blue. Some of these states and districts have had more recent polling. But still, I think they're going to go Harris. Oregon plus 5. I think Oregon's probably going to be much more safe than that. Um, Minnesota, Harris plus 7. I haven't marked Minnesota yet. I actually think it's going to be a little bit closer in that sense, but I will go ahead and give Minnesota to Harris, mainly because her vice president, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. I do expect Minnesota to go toward the Democrats, but I think that it might be a tad bit closer than that, as I'll get into in a little bit with reasonings why. Nebraska District 2, Harris plus 8, Maine District 2, Harris plus 5. We already marked both of those for the Democrats. And New Mexico, Harris plus 7, already marked for the Democrats. We're going to come back to Wisconsin in a little bit. New Hampshire, Harris plus 3.8. I kind of have a little bit more written on New Hampshire in a little bit, so we'll come back to that too. The likely red 5 to 10% here for the Republicans, Texas, Florida, and Ohio. I think all of those are going to break red, so I'm going to go for Trump for those. Then I have some states which are lean blue states. Virginia, which is Harris plus 3. Michigan, Harris plus 1.8. Arizona, Harris plus 1.4. Pennsylvania, Harris plus 1.3. A lot of these polls are polls I've gotten from earlier this week. There have been some more recent polls as of late. In fact, if we actually want to look at who's favored in some of these states, you can actually see the close margins of victory in some of these states. Michigan, Harris plus 2.7. Wisconsin, 2.3. 1.1 in both Nevada and Pennsylvania. Arizona's basically tied right now, Democrats plus 0.2. And then North Carolina, Trump plus 0.8. And then Georgia basically deadlocked, Trump barely in the lead by 1/10 of a percentage point. And this is a good site I like to use here. This is 538. This is Nate Silver, formerly Nate Silver's site. I don't know if he works for them anymore, but I still found this to be pretty accurate, even though they did have 2016 wrong. To be fair, a lot of the outlets and analysts had 2016 wrong, thinking that Hillary was going to win in a landslide. They ran the simulation about 1,000 times, and Harris wins 58% of the time. Trump wins 42% of the time. So relatively close, but things have leaned more in Harris's direction. Of course, we're going to get into some of the other states, but I did want to run through because there are a couple of situations where you can actually have a tie at 279 apiece. So I'm going to explain one of those. I think I actually have one of those written down in here. I'll have to find it. Um, Basically, if there's a tie at 269 apiece, then what would happen is the president would be elected by the House, and the vice president would be elected by the Senate. So there's actually a situation where Donald Trump could be the president and Tim Walz could be the vice president of the country, which would be crazy. So let's go ahead and mark a few more states here, just so I can we can get a little bit closer and I can show you some situations for what a tie might look like. So firstly, let's go to New Hampshire. I think New Hampshire is still very likely to go towards the Democrats. I would put them in the likely camp. I think right now it's, like I said, Harris plus 3.8, but New Hampshire has been a pretty safe blue state. I think I talk about them a little bit here as I get into some of the states. But New Hampshire is going to be a state that will go blue. Biden won it by over 59,000 in 2020, so we'll go ahead and give that one to Kamala Harris and the Democrats. As we continue going down here, we're going to go ahead and jump over to Virginia. Biden won it by 449,000 in 2020. Hillary won it in 2016 by 212,000. So for that reason alone, plus she's relatively ahead in the polls there too, we're going to go ahead and give Virginia as a likely state to the Democrats. So right now it's 219, 212 in favor of the Republicans. There are 5 situations here where it can end up in a tie. I want to go ahead and explore these at this point and what those could be. So the first one would be Pennsylvania going red, and a lot of these are Pennsylvania going red, which I do think is a possibility. Georgia and North Carolina going blue, and then Michigan in the first example here goes red. The second example goes blue. I think it going blue is much more likely. Again, we've already marked New Jersey as a blue state. In this example up here, New Jersey is blue, but Michigan is red. There is a small chance of that happening. I think it's low, but there is a small chance. Arizona going blue, which is looking like a possibility. I think that can go either way. And then Wisconsin and Nevada going red, which I do think are likely. So I would say out of all 5 of these tie scenarios right here, I would mark example number 1 as the most likely. The only question that I would have would be Michigan. And again, we're going to come back to some of these states here in a few moments. But again, if this example, this tie combination happens right here, we would be in a situation where it would be 269 to 269, and we would have potentially a split ticket for the presidency in 2024, which would be very, very interesting. And I want to say that would be historical. That might be one of the first times in history that we've actually had that. Let's go ahead, though, and jump back into some other states, which I think are pretty close. So I have New Jersey in here. New Jersey, I do think, is ultimately going to go for the Democrats. So we're going to go ahead and mark New Jersey as a likely blue state right here. So that should give the Democrats the edge. After that goes blue, it'll be 226 to 219. Sorry, my screen is not cooperating. There we go. So yeah, now we're pretty much down to the battleground states. We're down to the last 7 states on the list, and this right here, in my opinion, is what the election is going to come down to. Is who can win these more than the others, and I have something written for each of them. So let's go ahead and go one by one, and my thoughts for each of these here. So North Carolina, Trump won it by 74,000 votes in 2020, and I have written down here what are some of the biggest issues for the voters in these states. So inflation and national security are some of the top issues. And also over here, this is a really good site here, Emerson College Polling. This also talks about the most important issues for voters in a lot of these states. Through their polling, they found that in North Carolina, 48% the economy, then healthcare and education. Pretty much for every one of these swing states, it's going to be the economy. And you'll find that to be pretty common in a lot of election cycles, is that the economy, or in this situation, economy or inflation, are the most important issues for a lot of voters. You can see in some of these states here, Arizona, of course, closer to the border, immigration is the second biggest issue. But in 3 of these states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, threats to democracy are important issues. And for those voters, if that's important to them, they're most likely going to end up voting for Kamala Harris. Housing affordability in Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin, important issues. Immigration, still an important issue in Nevada and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, of course, you have a lot of workers there, and I think that the rhetoric that's been used by some on the right is that these immigrants are going to come take your jobs, and I think that in some cases, in many cases actually across this country, that has been effective messaging of sort. You could also see education as an important issue, as we talked about already. So pretty much those 4 or 5 issues, the most important important in the country when it comes to voters in the swing states. They were also asked if Project 2025 makes them more or less likely to support Donald Trump. Pretty much every single state here is less likely, and I think that's one of the main reasons you've seen Donald Trump in recent weeks is kind of try to distance himself from Project 2025. Even J.D. Vance has kind of distanced himself from a national abortion ban, something that he previously supported, and Trump has tried to make himself seem more moderate on the issue of abortion as well recently. So it'll be interesting to see, if their change in messaging on those issues ultimately changes the election in any way. Something that's also important to mention, as we get back to this map, is how much of a difference will RFK make in this election? We talked about it a little bit back on the last podcast, right before he dropped out, knowing that it was coming. When he dropped out, he was polling at just below 5%. And we all said on the podcast that we believe about 50 to 60% of his voters are either not going to vote or go third party. And then probably 30% will vote for Donald Trump, and then 10% will go to Kamala Harris, which would indicate about a 1 point swing for Donald Trump. But if we look at some latest polls here, this is the Real Clear Politics average polling. I'll go ahead and try to pull this up now for you guys as well. You can still see that in national polls, it's still pretty much deadlocked, but Harris is still a little bit ahead. And if you look at multi-candidate polls right here, Harris is still ahead by 2, ahead by 5. Even with Kennedy out of the race, you surely still have, Jill Stein and Cornel West with 1 or 2% of the vote. Again, maybe half a percentage point going in their direction after RFK drops out too. But ultimately, Kamala Harris still leads in the multi-candidate national polling, despite it being, a tad bit closer maybe than it was. So ultimately, not a big impact, and I don't expect it to have that big of an impact, especially since RFK is going to remain on the ballot in a lot of these states. There have been some challenges, but ultimately, RFK is going to remain on the ballot in key battleground states like North Carolina, like Michigan, amongst others. Go ahead and we'll go ahead and get back into talk about some specific states now. So we'll go ahead and start with Nevada. So I want to talk a little bit about Nevada. In 2020, only Clark and Washoe counties voted for Biden. That's only 2 of the 17 counties in the state, but those are also the counties with the highest population in Reno, Carson City, and then of course in Las Vegas and Henderson. And then you have more rural parts of the state that of course are leaning more red and are going to go towards Donald Trump. Just looking also, the top issues again: economy, secure elections, immigration, abortion rights. I think this one's really going to come down to how many young people really get out the vote. And how they really turn out in this election cycle. Ultimately, I think it's going to go blue. I think she's going to edge it out. Again, in polling right now, she does have a slight edge. It's not by a lot right now. I think Nevada is only up. It's Trump actually 0.4%. And we've seen, I think, the last 2 election cycles, Biden won it in 2020. And then in 2016, it went to Trump. But ultimately, I'm going to give Nevada leaning Democrat. I think it's going to be very close. But I'm going to say that Harris ultimately pulls that one out, so the Democrats continue their lead. 6 states to go. We're going to go ahead and stay down in the West, and we're going to talk a little bit about Arizona. So in 2020, Biden won it by 10,457 votes, winning the big cities like Flagstaff, Phoenix, and Tucson. Maricopa County, where Phoenix is, was the biggest change from 2016. RFK pulled a lot higher with Biden in the race in the primary. I think he was closer to 10%. And then the key issues for Arizona voters: immigration. Majority actually want a pathway to citizenship, and even some Republicans in the state actually want affordable housing. So I think that Harris's regarding affordable housing, I think, will have an impact on some of those Arizona voters. You saw we talked about no tax on tips becoming more of a thing when both candidates rallied or campaigned in Nevada. I think Harris started mentioning more about the housing incentives when she was campaigning or in and around Arizona. So again, those issues definitely go more towards Kamala Harris in terms of what the voters actually want. You do have some people in the state, of course, that are anti-immigration, but ultimately a majority of them do want a pathway towards citizenship. Um, I think ultimately it's going to lean Kamala Harris, and I think that she is going to win the state, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's within 15, 20,000 votes once again. It's going to be, I think, very, very close. Again, I believe that was a state, and it was a state that Hillary Clinton lost in 2016 and Donald Trump won. But I'm going to go ahead and give it to the Democrats right now. Again, this is. Some people would say this is a little bit too early. We're still roughly 70 days out from the election, but that's what I'm feeling, at least right now, regarding Arizona. So that leaves us 5 states here. I think we're going to go ahead and talk about North Carolina. Yeah, let's go ahead and jump over to North Carolina here. I think I have that at the top. Trump won North Carolina by 74,000 votes in 2020. And I don't have a ton to necessarily base this on. I think inflation being the top concern for voters, and I think a lot of people attributing that to Harris because of being a part of the, obviously Biden presidency, her being the vice president. I ultimately think Trump is going to win North Carolina, but that's one that could go either way. Again, we showed you the polls earlier in this, and North Carolina right now, Trump is plus zero point 0.8, but it could literally go either way between now and the election. But I'm going to go ahead and give North Carolina leaning Republican and give Donald Trump the win there. So much closer race now, 243 to 235. That leaves 4 states to go. There is still one tie scenario out of this, so we can go ahead and look back and explore that for the fun. And the one tie scenario would be Pennsylvania going Republican, Michigan going Republican, and then Georgia and Wisconsin going towards the Democrats. So keep that in mind as we continue with our prediction here. We got 4 states to go. Let's go ahead and, let's talk about Georgia, because I kind of want to leave the 3 states of Pennsylvania, Michigan and Wisconsin last. So let's talk a little bit about Georgia. So Georgia, of course, that was where Trump tried to get things overturned, saying that I just need 11,779 votes because that's what Biden won by. And so ultimately, what's come out of that is a top issue for voters there, preserving democracy. And I think that ultimately, what Trump did with that might have shot himself in the foot going forward. Inflation's also a huge issue for people over in Georgia. I think the scales are going to tip in favor of Harris just because I think a lot of voters are very scared of what happened last time. It's also important to mention that there are, I believe, 70 election officials that were essentially election deniers from 2020 that are going to be officials this time around. So a lot of people I think are not going to want to certify votes in these key battleground states if they are more so obviously on the Trump side. So Democrats definitely should be ready and get their lawyers ready for these elections because I think there's going to still be a lot of hotly contested states and issues even after the fact. And if they need to do everything they can to legally prevent there to be any overturn of the election. Of course, we saw what happened last time when it came to January 6th and when it came to election denialism in 2020. But right now, with nothing else to base it on other than that, I think I have to give leaning Democrat. And I'm going to go ahead and say Georgia goes towards Kamala Harris. So 259 to 235. And it comes down to this 3 states to go Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Let's go ahead and talk about Pennsylvania a little bit here. So I'll go ahead and scroll down here and talk about Pennsylvania. I believe I have this my second to last one. Yes. So in 2020, Biden won it by 80,555 votes. Trump won it in 2016 by 44,292. Some of the biggest issues in Pennsylvania: inflation, reproductive freedoms, border security, and energy policy. The big key thing here is more than 60,000 voters didn't vote for Biden in the Democratic primary. And we're going to see this become an issue when we talk about Michigan and Wisconsin as well. While Biden isn't in the race anymore and Harris has definitely gotten more engagement, I think, from the Democrats, a lot of people have been comparing what she has done with her campaign in terms of likability or just getting people out, more people out there, whether it's independents or Democratic voters, to be energized and actually want to vote for her. I ultimately think that the 60,000 voters who didn't vote for Biden, it was very much related to foreign policy, and I don't think we've seen enough of a change from Harris on that front. Uh, Trump does need to campaign a lot more on economics and saving jobs. I think, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's going to be very close. I think Pennsylvania is going to go red. Right now, Democrats have it by 1.1, but we've seen in the past that the polls haven't always been right. And I just think that Pennsylvania has more of a likelihood of going towards Donald Trump right now than it does towards going to the Democrats. So that right there makes it very close once again. It's 259, 254 in favor of the Democrats. So it comes down to Wisconsin and Michigan. Let's go ahead and talk about Wisconsin a little bit. I wanted to talk about this one because this is interesting. Trump hasn't won a single poll there in over a month. In 2020, Biden won by 20,682 votes. Trump won by 22,748 in 2016. That is only a difference of 2,066 votes. So, I mean, we're talking razor thin margin, even potentially this time around. I'm going to go ahead and bring up this. I think we can get this off the screen here along with this, and we're going to bring up this ABC News poll talking about some of the most important issues for Wisconsin voters, and you will find a lot of them do actually lean more towards the Democrats on that side. Healthcare being one for this voter. They believe Donald Trump's going to eliminate the Affordable Care Act. And then we scroll down a little bit more. This Republican voter, Valerie Schmidt, she said the biggest issue for her is the border, believing that there's a big issue with a massive influx of immigrants and migrants. U.S. security is compromised. This voter believe in democracy is the most important concern. So, I mean, you still see relatively the same issues that people are concerned about. But also, you have the economy and inflation, and then also Gaza. There were 47,800 uncommitted votes in the Democratic primary. And I want to talk about this article from Al Jazeera here a little bit. Nearly 50,000 Wisconsin voters chose uninstructed, the state's version of uncommitted, in Tuesday's Democratic primary as part of a growing campaign in the United States where protesters are using the ballot to voice their displeasure with Joe Biden's handling of the war in Gaza. State election officials announced that the uninstructed option accounted for more than 47,800 votes cast, or nearly 8.3% of the total, surpassing the 20,682 votes by which Biden defeated Trump in 2020. Now, that's back in April. And again, we do have a different candidate right now. But if we look at her speech, we look at the fact that there wasn't even a Palestinian American that was allowed to speak at the DNC. I think that I would say that she gets a little bit of a boost for not being Joe Biden, and in which, some of those uncommitted voters maybe would have leaned her direction or maybe would consider voting for her. But there's also a lot of voters there that aren't going to like still the fact that she didn't really do anything to show that she's going to change her tune on the issue of Gaza. And at the same time, the fact there wasn't even a Palestinian American allowed to speak, and the uncommitted movement couldn't even say that they're for Kamala Harris still because of what happened there. They protested outside of the United Center. Muslim woman for Harris Walls has completely withdrawn their support. And this is a tough one because they have to overcome a 2 point. Trump has to overcome a 2.3 point margin here that it leans towards the Democrats, and he's not great on the issue of Israel Gaza either. But Wisconsin, of course, leaned Trump's way in 2016, and I think he's going to overcome this because Harris has not changed her viewpoint on this issue enough, and I think it's going to be razor thin. But I'm going to give Wisconsin to the Republicans. That might be a bit of a controversial take there. I think a lot of analysts and a lot of people are going to give it to the Democrats, but I just don't think that she has changed her tone enough on the issue of Gaza to be able to win and carry that state, because there's a lot of Muslim voters in that state that are going to sit this one out or that are going to vote third party. So ultimately, Wisconsin goes red just barely. So it comes down to Michigan. And this is an interesting state. I have a lot to say about this state, so we're going to go ahead and talk about Michigan, and we'll see who's going to win the presidency, at least according to me. Michigan, Biden won it by 154,188 votes in 2020. Trump won it by only 10,704 in 2016. So if we compare that with Wisconsin, that's actually Trump winning it by less than he even did there. And I think that Trump won Michigan in 2016 by less than Biden won Georgia in 2020. So, I mean, again, it was a razor thin margin in 2016, and then Biden won it by a better amount in 2020. Harris currently, at least in the averages earlier this week, was up 6 to 8% in recent polls. As of now, and we kind of saw this earlier, she's up 2.7% on average if we look at the average of 15 different polls. And I think there was a poll that even came out today in Michigan that Harris was up 3 in the Hill. So again, that's a little bit lower, and we can dive a little bit deeper here into some of these real clear politics polls of Michigan. On average, she's up 2.3%, and a lot of these polls up 3, up 3, up 2, up 1, up 4, up 3. Trump hasn't won a poll in Michigan, I want to say, over a month. So it's going to, that's a thing to take into account there as well. But also, got to talk about some of the issues that are most important: inflation, threats to democracy, abortion, immigration, and of course, once again, we have to bring up Gaza. This is another issue, and this is an article back in The Guardian in March: how the uncommitted movement rocked Biden over Gaza. People in Michigan and across the country had been protesting for months over the Gaza war and the U.S. government's role in it, marching in the streets, showing up at the president's public events, and pressuring their elected officials to support a ceasefire. But it didn't seem as though Joe Biden was listening to a groundswell of Democrats who opposed the war, and U.S. media coverage of the protests and of the war itself seems to be waning too. The burgeoning anti-war movement needed another way to get the president's attention. It landed on a strategy telling Democratic voters to cast ballots for uncommitted, essentially no one, as a protest against the war in Gaza to demand a ceasefire. And then ultimately, if we scroll down a little bit, the goal was to get 10,000 votes for uncommitted. They made over 500,000 phone calls, sent over 600,000 text messages to voters, and more than 101,000 Michigan Democrats, 13% who voted, cast ballots for uncommitted, winning 2 delegates to the Democratic National Convention, and awoke the modern anti-war movement. So again, they set a goal for only 10,000. They got 10 times that amount for uncommitted. And again, that's 101,000 Michigan Democrats. And like I said, for Wisconsin, sure, that's, there's some of those voters that, since Biden's out of the race, are going to vote for Kamala. But we saw how poorly the uncommitted movement was treated at the Democratic National Convention. So even if 2/3 of these people still don't vote for Kamala, that's 67,000 votes in a state where Biden won by 154,000, Trump won by 10,000 in 2016. So if she's going to be hated for that policy, this is going to be a lot closer than this poll right here says and than the average says. The average right now at 2.7, that might as well be 0.5. In my opinion, I think that this issue doesn't get talked about enough. And I think it's going to be a razor thin margin. And this is why it's so important for Harris and Walz to change their strategy on this issue and completely just move away from Joe Biden. I know that Biden is the president right now, but if Harris wants to win this, and she wants to win comfortably, she has to distance herself from the current president. She has to distance herself from Joe Biden. She has to be her own person and show that she is going to enact policies that will be different than the Biden administration. And Trump, conversely, if he wants to win, he needs to start campaigning more. There's been reports he's been playing a ton of golf, and that his, staffers are worried that he's phoning it in. Also, there's been reports recently that there's basically more crimes that are being brought up against him, and his own lawyer is worried about him spending 6 to 9 years in prison. If he wants to win, and Vance, he wants to win with Vance especially, even though Tulsi Gabbard and RFK have come out to support him, he has to hammer home economic policy to the American people. And they have not ran a campaign on that. They've ran a very much, not so much social justice warrior campaign, but still immigration campaign. We're not the other people campaign. She's corrupt, and it's been very much the same talking points that he's used in the past. And JD Vance is like Mr. Negative persona, negative aura. They have to find a way to step it up and talk about economic policy if they're going to win some of these states. Ultimately, I don't think Trump is strong enough or is smart enough to do that. And I think that Kamala, well, she's not going to change her tone a ton. I think she's at least going to offer some nuggets of positive thought on some of those issues, such as Gaza and others as well. And she's already kind of talked about some of her economic policy, which is positive and popular with the American people. Because of that, I'm going to say Michigan goes to Kamala Harris, and the presidency of the United States goes to Kamala Harris, 274 to 264. This is a lot closer than I think a lot of outlets and a lot of people are going to say, but I genuinely think it's going to be a razor thin margin of victory. And again, this is why it's important that the Democrats are lawyered up, because if it's this close, there's no doubt in my mind Trump is just going to deny, 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 and a lot of his followers out there are going to do everything they can to try to overturn this election, and it's going to be interesting to see if the democracy that we have stands up to that, and if we have the lawyers that actually do the right things, and if the votes are certified when it comes to early 2025. I think it's going to be really close. I think Harris choosing Tim Walz as her vice president is also very huge because it shows that she's willing to lend credence at least to some progressive ideas, and she has come out on the side of some progressive ideas on the economy. That is going to help in a lot of these swing states. I think even though she has not changed her tune on foreign policy, I think a lot of these swing states, her changing her tune on economic policy is going to help. I just still think it's not going to be enough in Pennsylvania and North Carolina. And I do think Wisconsin is going to go towards Donald Trump. These two states right here, admittedly, I am not 100% confident about. I would not be surprised if both went Republican. I would not be surprised if both went Democrat, and Trump did win the election. But I would say like there's a very, very difficult path to victory for Donald Trump, because he has to pick off either both of these states while winning Pennsylvania and North Carolina. He has to pick off Georgia, which I think is going to be very difficult. And then he has to pick off Arizona and Nevada, which I think are realistic. But again, even if you pick those off, you have to pick off an extra state here, or you have to keep these red. It's going to be very difficult for Donald Trump to win this election. There is a pathway to victory for him, and that alone should ring alarm bells in the Democratic Party, especially when it comes to important issues affecting the voters feel in this country. So we'll see. Again, it's still early. A lot's going to happen between now and then. There's still, some debates to happen. Debates, obviously, in the vice presidential debates with Walz and Vance are going to be coming up in October. You have the debates with Harris and Trump that are going to be coming up starting on September 10th, if that even remains, because there's questions around that right now with the whole rules that are going on. But at the end of the day, I'm going to say Democrats 274, Republicans 264. Harris wins the presidency. So that's my prediction. Tell me what you think about it in the comments below. Tell me what you thought about the video, specific states. Feel free to reach out to me on there. Feel free to shoot me a message on Instagram at A2Jack. You can always reach out to me there as well. But that is going to do it for our official election prediction for 2024. We will have more episodes that will be coming out over the next couple of weeks as well, talking about specific issues once again. So stay tuned for those. And until next time, take care, everybody. Peace out.